Thin and light gaming laptops are no longer a novelty, as practically every PC maker offers their own take on the category. Some of them don't always stand out from the crowd, however, and can push the envelope on thermals in ever tighter chassis designs. That is most definitely not the case with Dell's Alienware M15 R3 though. Unless you want to compare it to last year's Alienware M15 R2, at a passing glance, this year's refresh looks just like last year's model. That is not a bad thing, as the new M15 R3 is a head-turning laptop with some notable improvements to this newest iteration, including a revamped cooling solution. Before we start, go ahead and subscribe. Also press the bell button to get the latest updates. Without any further delay, let us start. Quite frankly, we're just fine with the overall physical design staying the same for another round. Dell had already given the M15 a complete facelift last year, ditching the grey digs and outdated aesthetic of the original model and dressing up the M15 R2 with a much spiffier suit. Now for what is left for 2020, the M15 R3 maintains the same outer style, but with faster parts on the inside, an upgraded internal thermal design, and improved voltage regulation. In short, the improvements for this refresh are not necessarily things you'll see, but they make this an overall better performing laptop. That said, Dell did add a high-endurance clear coat on the exterior finish of this year's model, which is supposed to increase stain resistance. We still would not recommend pawing at this laptop if your fingers are covered in Cheetos dust or anything of the sort. But in general, the coating is intended to thwart fingerprints and smudges. Therefore, we will take it. The Alienware M15 R1 and R2 both ran on Intel's 9th generation core processors. This time around, the Alienware M15 R3 makes the leap to Intel's latest high-performance mobile silicon, with 3 different 10th generation Core Comet Lake H processor options: Core i5-10300H, Core i7-10750H, and Core i9-10980HK. Our model sports a Core i7-10750H, which is a 6-core 12-thread chip capable of boosting to 5 GHz. It also has 12 MB of internal smart cache, read L3 cache. This is paired with 16 GB of DDR4 2666 memory and a pair of 512 GB M2 NVMe solid-state drives configured in RAID 0 for 1 TB total of high-speed storage. Of course, it is primarily about the GPU when it comes to gaming, and this configuration boasts a discrete NVIDIA GeForce RTX 2070 with 6 GB of GDDR6 memory. Note that this is the full-power version of the GeForce RTX 2070 and not the Max-Q variant. Dell is confident enough in the cooling that it opted for the faster part. Originally, this configuration was offered as a base option. That is no longer the case. Dell changed things based on demand and other reasons. We are told you can still customize the Alienware M15 R3 to these exact specifications, and at the time of this writing, doing so costs about $2,122.68 before any coupons, promo codes that might be available. Discount codes are fairly common at Dell, so there is your caveat for all this horsepower and the Alienware cache. It doesn't come cheap. However, you could knock a few $100 off by dropping down to a 1080p LCD display with a 144Hz refresh rate and further reduce the price by opting for 512 GB of storage and a GeForce RTX 2060. You'd still be left with a powerful gaming laptop at a more palatable $1,603.28, also at the time of this writing. You're still looking at a premium compared to some of the competition, and especially those based on AMD's latest generation Ryzen 4000H series like the Asus TUF Gaming A15. There are lower priced out there based on parts alone. However, the Alienware M15 R3's all-around build quality, from the chassis and touchpad to internal cooling, is generally a cut above those laptops, so that is something to factor in. There's no mistaking this laptop for anything but an Alienware system. It has a unique look, though compared to the original M15 is far less ostentatious with a more modern design language. The iconic Alienware logo sits on the lid and lights up with the number 15 etched into the lower portion of the lid using a distinct font. Dell offers 2 color options, Dark Side of the Moon and Lunar Light. We received the Lunar Light model, and quite frankly, it is a gorgeous design that our photos simply don't do justice. It also resists fingerprints and smudges well, whether because of the color scheme, materials, or that special high-endurance coating we mentioned earlier. Connectivity options on the sides consist of a USB 3.2 Generation 1 port, 3.5mm audio port, and a killer E300 2.5 gigabits per second Ethernet port on the left, and 2 more USB 3.2 Generation 1 ports on the right, along with a microSD card reader. Each side also sports a vent to expel hot air. This is one of a relatively small number of laptops that jettisons some of the I/O ports to the rear. That is where you'll find the HDMI 2B with HDCP 2.2 support and mini DisplayPort 1.4 outputs, along with a Thunderbolt 3 Type-C port, DC in, and the proprietary Alienware graphics amplifier port. The proprietary port affords you the luxury of plugging in Dell's external graphics box. It is an optional $229 accessory, plus you'll need to bring your own graphics card. It's not clear if the current model supports NVIDIA's latest generation GeForce RTX 30 series, but if not, we strongly suspect an updated version will. Taking advantage of the external graphics option obviously adds a significant cost to the equation. It's not really necessary, except perhaps if you want to take full advantage of the 4K OLED display option, as found on our review unit. It essentially gives you the option of turning this into a desktop replacement without committing to the bulkier form factor. You could leverage an external GPU at home and leave the accessory at home when traveling. This is not an edge-to-edge or infinity-edge display, as found on some of Dell's productivity laptops like the XPS 159500. However, the bezels are not thick. The image quality is excellent and is usually the case on OLED screens, and we found the brightness to be adequate. At 100% brightness, we measured 604 lux with our light meter. The Alienware motif extends to the main deck. Above the keyboard sits a row of vents with a sort of honeycomb styling, separated on the right by the power button in the shape of the Alienware logo. This lights up like the logo on the lid as well. Same goes for the keyboard. This particular model features per-key lighting, which is a $29.40 upgrade over zone lighting with 4 customizable zones. Both options are of the RGB variety, naturally. Typing is pretty good too. For a laptop keyboard, the keys are slightly concave, 0.2mm, and offer 1.7mm of key travel, with decent response and bounce. And underneath, the seamless glass trackpad with integrated scrolling and buttons work well, registering gestures and taps with consistency. For models configured with a GeForce GTX 1660 Ti or higher, Dell bumped up the GPU voltage regulation from 8 phases to 12 phases, and 6 phases for the CPU. This is part of what Dell dubs hyper-efficient voltage regulation. That is all for today, folks. Tell us in the comment section what is your point of view about being short. See you soon with another amazing video.